Soon after I turned 12, my family moved to the small rural town of Cransbyl. We rented a brick house that was located at the very end of the road, a dirt path bordered by acres of forest. I loved that place. Those wide stretches of greenery were a big change from the small apartment where we used to live. Among our neighbors, there was a girl my age named Johanna. She had also moved in recently, and despite my shyness, we naturally became friends. Joha and I spent most of the days in June riding our bikes around the city. We loved watching the new movies showing, or simply reading books at the Cransbyl library. Joha shared my love for fiction, but she preferred drawing. Often, during our outings, she would put her hand in her little bag and take out her sketchbook. She would draw whatever caught her attention. Joha was smart, very creative, and so kind that she gave a chance to the shy kid I was. Unlike the other more outgoing kids in town, Joha wasn't just my best friend, but she was the only friend I had in Cransbyl. Years later, I tell myself I should never have met her. The older I get, the more I realize how unfair memory is. It can be bitter and terribly cruel. Some of my happy memories have started to fade and blur, like a photograph that fades over the years. But the sad moments take up more and more space, and my regrets remain intact. One morning, Joha called me to let me know she wasn't feeling well, and that her mother wanted her to stay home. I passed the time watching television and reading a novel. But neither of these activities managed to distract me, because all I wanted to do was go outside, breathe the fresh air, and feel the sun warming my skin. When that feeling became too hard to ignore, I got on my bike and started my solo ride down a dirt path. I quickly regretted my choice. The miles of road felt especially long this time because I was alone. And just as I was about to turn back, I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. I stopped and glanced at the tall trees that were just to my right. That's when I found a path leading deep into the forest. I looked at the path in disbelief because it was the very first time I had seen it. Johan had never mentioned it either. During our previous walks, it had gone completely unnoticed by us. I still don't know why I got off my bike, or even why I approached it. It wasn't curiosity that made me move forward, but a strange and magnetic urge. Yet a feeling of unease was growing inside me more and more. With every step I took, despite everything, I kept moving forward. Walking and crushing the roots jutting from the ground in my path didn't help at all. The atmosphere of the forest was strange. It gave the feeling that everything was perfectly calm, way too calm. Only the sound of my footsteps seemed to disturb the silence. I finally reached the end of the path. I then found myself in front of a house so decrepit that only a miracle could keep it standing. It was surrounded by tall grass, bushes filled with large thorns, and ivy climbing like snakes on the exterior facade. Almost all the windows had been damaged. Some had such fine crack marks they looked like spider webs, while others were just a pile of broken glass. Rows of tiles were missing from the sagging roof, and the white paint on the facade had turned grey. Judging by the neglected state of the house, it was clear that no one had lived there for a very long time. As I neared the dilapidated porch, a sudden euphoria washed over me. I had never felt such a powerful and infinite joy. I sensed something amazing awaited me inside, and eagerly anticipated discovering it. The moment I put my hand on the rusty handle, a faint piercing sound came and cleared away the fog that had settled in my mind. I immediately froze, way too scared to even dare to move. Then I held my breath, and that's when I heard that sound again. This time it was clearer, a creaking noise, like footsteps on old wood. The sound came from behind the door. I widened my eyes as the handle slowly turned by itself under my fingers. That was enough to snap me out of my strange trance-like feeling. I jumped off the porch and ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding hard against my chest. Dodging every obstacle, I got back on my bike and pedaled home as hard as I could without stopping. I didn't mention my scary adventure when my parents got home from work. A few hours later, I knew they'd be upset if they found out I'd been snooping in someone else's place. and I didn't want to risk being punished for the rest of summer vacation. 2 days later, Joha recovered from her cold. When I mentioned my afternoon in the forest, she looked at me with a mix of disbelief and excitement. As the thunder began to rumble above our heads,
"You have to show me where it is,"
she said enthusiastically.
"If we leave now, I'm sure we'll be back before the rain starts."
I looked at her, disturbed and surprised by her request.
"I'm not going back there, but I've explored the city and never saw that. If I go alone, it'll take forever to find the place."
Are you serious? Did you miss the scary part of my story? Johan smiled at me without any condescension in his eyes. I could tell that she didn't believe me.
"I'm sure it was just a normal noise, and you mistook it for something sinister."
No, that's not it. Johan, I truly felt the handle turn on its own.
But maybe you just thought you felt it. Remember the last night you stayed at my place and thought the branch outside the window was a ghost's arm? Or when we watched that horror movie and you had nightmares for a whole week?
Uncomfortable, right? I answered with a small yes. She smiled again, and I started to feel a bit stupid, even though I hated to admit it. The truth was that sometimes my imagination tended to get the better of my reason.
"We don't have to stay long. I just want to take a look and maybe do a few sketches."
Without giving me a single chance to answer, I would have started piddling with determination. I followed him, and I led him reluctantly. By the time we reached the path I found yesterday, I already regretted telling him everything. I struggled to keep up with my best friend as we went deeper into the trees. The feeling of special magnetism that I had experienced during my previous visit had been replaced by a suffocating apprehension, which made me feel like my feet weighed a ton. I tried to believe Joha was right, and I'd imagined the cracking noise and the handle moving, but I couldn't. By the time we got to the house, I was shaking all over. "Hurry up," I whispered. "I don't feel well." I watched the surroundings as Joha scribbled in his notebook, each minute dragging by slowly. Despite the mild temperature, I kept trembling while raindrops started to run down my skin. I looked at the sky with disdain, secretly wishing to sit in a bookstore with a book in hand, or comfortably seated with popcorn in a theater. "Are you almost finished? The storm's starting soon." When I looked down at her, a feeling of panic immediately overwhelmed me. The door of the house was wide open, revealing a dimly lit interior, and I tried to scream, my voice trembling. Every part of my body was screaming at me to run away as fast as possible. However, I couldn't even take a single step. Even when the cracking noise, which had become familiar to me, started coming from the dark house, I stared at the door, petrified. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it was going to explode. At that moment, I saw a woman emerge from the shadows. Even though I wish I could forget, I think that horrible image of the woman will haunt me for life. Her long black hair trailed across the boards of the decrepit porch. Her hair was full of knots the size of a fist. A torn wing drooped over her frail body. The latter was moldy and stained. I couldn't tell you its exact color, but it looked like a kind of coppery brown. Her knobby hands ended in long, twisted and deformed fingers. Her veins were bulging. Her thin, transparent skin seemed like it would open if touched even lightly. But what terrified me the most was her face. It was distorted by an expression of hatred, as if I had just done something unforgivable to her. And saliva had accumulated on her colorless lips, which gave her sneer a wild, almost animalistic look. The woman's red eyes burned with an indescribable fury as she stared at me with an icy gaze. She moved forward to the porch, then continued toward the other plants. Moving in a threatening way, I held myself back from screaming at the top of my lungs. She was now close enough for me to see dried blood under her yellow, brittle nails. I wanted to tell her that I would never set foot on her property again, that I would leave and never come back if she agreed to let me go. But instead, I stood there in silence, watching her furious, compassionless face come closer and closer to me. But suddenly, a hand grabbed my t-shirt and pulled me back. "Run!" and in the blink of an eye, we started running in the rain, which was now pouring down. It was raining so hard that the ground had become slippery and muddy. "Why is that? Did you open the door?" And I shouted in a panicked tone.
I don't know.
Joha answered me back, her voice trembling as if she was about to cry.
I didn't mean to do it, and suddenly I found myself with my hand on the handle and
Joha had just tripped over a root. Sometimes when I couldn't sleep and had nothing to distract me, terrible memories would flood my mind. I close my eyes and I hear the sound Joha's head made when it crashed against a moss-covered rock. Above all, the silence after that terrible sound.
Joha?
I felt sick to my stomach when I turned him over and saw blood flowing from his skull. Joha's eyes were shut and his chest rose faintly. I desperately tried to wake her with every breath, even trying to carry her. However, I soon realized her still body was too heavy for me. And during that time, the persistent sounds of footsteps approaching us kept echoing. "I need to get help. I promise I'll return for you." I whispered softly, tears streaming down my face as I hid Joha's body beneath a thick bush. And then I ran to my bike and I pedaled as fast as I could all the way home. I was drenched in sweat and rain. When I finally got home, my voice broken by my crying, I called my mother, who then called the police. Within minutes, several police officers were outside our house. Obviously, no one believed me. The two police officers I was telling my story to were as stoic as my parents were shocked. Sitting next to me on the couch, they seemed terrified by what I was telling. And I lost all credibility. When they asked me to take them up there, to find the path that led to the old house, I was unable to find it again. No matter how hard I searched, the place had inexplicably disappeared. That night I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop hearing Joha's mother's heartbreaking screams. When they learned about her disappearance, I heard the name Johanna being called out by the other neighbors. They searched the forest for her, but found nothing. The search lasted for weeks, and each time the result was the same. They never found Johanna. We moved a month later. According to my mother, it was a new beginning, but I carried my grief and guilt everywhere I went. I blame myself for what happened to Joha. And even now, I still feel guilty. I often wonder how things would have turned out. If I had never met Johanna, maybe she would have grown up and become a famous artist. And I surely would have become something other than the empty shell I am today. Many years have passed since that traumatic afternoon, and I spent each one of them hating myself and regretting. I keep thinking about her and how I couldn't save her. But I think I can make things right now. Because a little earlier tonight, I felt the need to drive, and I drove to Cransbyl. Things hadn't really changed there, except that most of the small shops had been replaced by big chain stores. The public library had undergone some renovations, and now there was a supermarket where the movie theater used to be. As I walked along the little dirt path that led me to my old house, I noticed something I never thought I would see again. The passage had reappeared. My own existence disgusts me. I have given up all dreams and hope. I work in a place I hate, and I have no friends. I'm no longer afraid to walk in the forest. Even if the horrible woman is certainly there, her infernal rage can't be worse than the unbearable pain I've endured all these years. I hope to find my best friend right where I left her, like Fiji, patiently waiting for me to fulfill the promise I made before leaving her. This time I won't leave without her. I honestly think that this road, I have to take it alone. I doubt anyone can find me. But don't worry, I'm ready to face whatever awaits me. And if you ever find yourself one day along a path lined with forest, make sure to look between the trees. Maybe you'll find the same thing I did. But above all, don't make the mistake I made. Because the horrible woman might decide to take you away too.